Freezing.
Mm-hmm. Broadcast. Hello, everybody. This is Jeff Jenkins and Eric Clayman here. We're the two partners at Jenkins and Clayman, one of New Jersey's premier law firms for bankruptcy. And we're here today to talk about, to try to give you some tips about dealing with the financial aspects of COVID, the planning about what you should spend money on and so forth. So this is our 23rd episode, although last week we tried to do the same show and it just didn't work. So we're doing it through a different way this week. I don't know what happened last week. Maybe Facebook was too busy deleting all the political messages that they don't like. I don't know.
But you can see the higher production quality. Look over my head, Jeff. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. So back to our topic. With this COVID-19 pandemic, a lot of people have lost their jobs. People have gotten or had their hours reduced. People that lose their jobs, the unemployment places have been so busy, it's hard to get unemployment. Can't even talk to anybody. I think I read something about California one day in the paper that said that they would answer 1 out of every 1,000 phone calls. That's pretty good service. So it's been very difficult financially for a lot of people. And today we want to talk about some things that maybe you can do to help yourself and help that aspect of the COVID-19 problems. We identified certain things. We're going to talk about doing a budget, and we tried to prioritize important things that you would include in a budget, and that's basically what a budget is. It's looking at the things that you need to spend money on each month and then prioritizing them. So our list isn't the be-all and end-all. It's just Eric and Jeff's opinion, but it's hopefully pretty close to what it should be. The first thing that we felt was important, or the most important thing, would be paying for your home or your shelter, if you want to say it that way. I mean, if you don't have a home, you've got a problem. Other things aren't that easy to, or aren't that difficult to fix. But if you're out in the street or whatever, it's not a good situation. So we felt that taking care of your payments for your home would be the number one thing that you would need to pay attention to when you're doing a budget. And that's the first thing that should absorb money that you make during the course of a month.
And that's what we're going to talk about right now, Jeff.
Yes.
How much money should it pay? Well, if you're talking to a mortgage broker about buying a new house, they're going to give you this high percentage of what you can afford because the mortgage company wants you to borrow as much money as possible. So they make the points, they make the commissions, and they make as much money as possible. And what you really have to be careful of when buying your first home or buying a home is the anticipated expenses going forward. In other words, you're buying a home, you and your spouse, and then 4 years later, you have 3 children, your budget's going to be a little bit off. Not only that, in the era of COVID, and that's really where we're pointed today, often one spouse has to stay home with the children because daycare, nursery school, preschool, kindergarten, and some of the elementary schools are not allowing the students there. So what used to be a 2-income household becomes a 1-income household. Well, how does that play in with us? Well, one of the things that Congress included in the bankruptcy code is the ability to surrender collateral or reject residential leases. I don't usually speak like a lawyer, but that's right out of the bankruptcy code. What do I mean by that?
That did sound like a lawyer.
That did. I'm not dressed like a lawyer, but I speak like a lawyer today. Well, let's talk first about rejecting a residential lease, Jeff.
Okay.
That means that someone is in over their head in their apartment or they could be renting a house, or the house has mold and the landlord's not fixing it. Our clients The renters want to get out of this deal, and it's so expensive to sue your landlord in court. And to try to go by yourself and sue a landlord without a lawyer is even harder.
Right.
So, Jeff, what can the bankruptcy court do if you're stuck in a residential lease that you can't afford, or you have a landlord that's not helping you as he should be?
Right. See how we work the bankruptcy code into this. It's pretty sneaky. When you file a bankruptcy, if you have a lease or an executory contract, now I sound like a lawyer, but let's just say a lease because we're talking about leases. You have to decide whether you want to keep the lease or get rid of it, assume it or reject it. And if you have a lease for an apartment, let's say, and you're behind a little bit with your rent, as many people are right now, and you want to stay in your apartment, you want to keep that lease, then if you file a bankruptcy, the bankruptcy code says that you have to cure any arrears that exist promptly. And promptly, what does it mean? It depends on your bankruptcy judge, but generally maybe 24 months would be the max, although a lot of times the courts will let us have a longer period of time, just, depending on what's going on. So your arrears you would pay by making monthly payments to the Chapter 13 trustee, and you'd resume making your normal monthly rent payments the month after the bankruptcy was filed.
And that's fine if you want to keep the lease.
Exactly, that's right. And Eric was also talking about not only keeping, but what if you wanted to get rid of it? If you want to reject the lease, then you can. You just, with a lease, you just say in your Chapter 13 plan that you want to reject it if you're doing a Chapter 13. And the bankruptcy will take care of anything that you might owe the landlord. Right. So you can reject it. That means you got to find another place to live, but you don't have to worry about the rent arrears.
Right. And it's, remember, when we talk about immediacy in bankruptcy, you're immediately protected from an eviction, even if you're behind, as long as there's no judgment against you. And we've spoken about that before. But when Jeff says that the debt will be discharged or forgiven without any payment, you just have to find a new place to live, but it's not immediate. You have some time. The bankruptcy court settles everything down for you, the bankruptcy filing. So you have some time before you have to move out, but you won't owe your landlord any more money. Now, the other shelter or home question is, what about the mortgage? The person has bought a home, purchased a home, but now just can't afford it. How do they get out of that? And that's also by filing bankruptcy. You can file a bankruptcy to stop a foreclosure or stop a sheriff's sale. And most of our clients do just what Jeff explained on the residential lease. They do an arrears cure. They put the back payments into the bankruptcy, resume mortgage payments, and pay a trustee the arrears over 3 to 5 years. But if you just can't afford it, or you don't like your neighbor, suppose your neighbor has 12 Doberman pinschers, your house is your house value, you bought it for $200,000, it's now worth $125,000. You owe $300,000 on it, and you come in and say, Jeff, I just don't want this house anymore. My wife and me, we can move in with the relatives in North Carolina and be so much happier. But you signed a note, you signed a mortgage. Can you get out of something like that?
Of course you can. It's just like the lease situation. When you file a bankruptcy, you can keep your house or get rid of it. If you have a house, a car, a trailer, anything that has a secured loan attached to it, you can take care of that loan by surrendering the property to the lender. So you would just have, if we're doing a Chapter 13, let's say your Chapter 13 plan would provide for the surrender of your home to the mortgage holder. And as a practical matter, all you're doing is really letting them proceed with a foreclosure action. Surrender doesn't mean that you have to leave the place, your home, the next day.
Right. And you're doing two things. You're letting them foreclose, but you're making it clear to the world that you do not have to pay that debt back.
Right. So we've talked about leases and mortgages. Of the most important thing we think is part of a budget. And next, let's talk about utilities. That was our
goal, Jeff. And you're right, because some utilities, look, electric and gas, for the most part in New Jersey, there isn't a lot of choice there. So you have what you have. But there's other utility expenses that maybe you can work on and reduce to make things more affordable, right?
Right. One thought I had that I forgot to mention, if you're dealing back to the home or lease situation. The bankruptcy code, as you can see from our explanation, is made exactly for that kind of problem. So here we are, and a lot of people are behind in their rent. A lot of people are behind in their mortgage. That's what a bankruptcy was created for. I mean, it's perfect if you are way behind. You shouldn't hesitate to at least contact a bankruptcy attorney and talk to them about what your options are.
And
So-
now I'm going to jump on that also because today's purpose was about budgeting. So we did talk a lot about surrender.
Mhm.
But Jeff and I both touched on the fact most of our clients who are behind with their rent or behind on their mortgage come in not to surrender, but to work on a plan to keep it. That's
Right.
certainly what a bankruptcy can do to help you.
Right. Now, as far as utilities go, that's something that we put in the second position, and they are important. I mean, if it's the winter time and you don't have any heat, that's not a good thing. If you don't have any electricity, whether it's summer or winter, it's a bad thing. So maybe utilities, when you're doing your budget, you're going to look at the housing expense, the expense for your home first, and the utilities second. Now, in New Jersey, the utility companies have not been shutting off service for months, but you still owe the money. And if we did a bankruptcy, for example, and you were behind with your utilities, we would certainly include them in the bankruptcy, and we could perhaps get rid of the back payments that you owed, and you would just start off after we filed the bankruptcy. The next time a utility bill came due, you'd have to pay it.
The current bill.
Yes.
The old one would go away
Exactly
and the
right.
service would
Yep.
be maintained.
Yep.
And there's also a lot, when we talk about budgeting, be careful of your cable and your internet and your cell phones. Those are three things that we see, three budget entry items that we see our clients come in and they signed up for what they signed up for 6 months ago, a year ago, 4 years ago, and it's out of control. Really look to cut back on cable, internet. What you needed internet for 3 years ago, now a basic internet would give you more power than the advanced one that you were paying for and are still paying for. And thirdly is cell phones. You can buy one online. You don't need to go with Verizon or AT&T. There are other, you go to Walmart and Target and get a cell phone that serves most purposes for just a fraction. In other words, if your money is tight, do you want to be stretching the tightness to pay for a cell phone? Not really. That's an area where you can really find savings.
Exactly. Why don't we move on then? Our third thing on our list of budget items is food. And food is, you have to eat. It's
Somewhat important.
yeah, it's pretty critical. But food is something that you can do a lot of things with. Certainly, you don't want to go out if you're working. You don't want to order food out every day. Eric and I have talked about that. I mean, we both said that once upon a time, I know I did when I was in the Army, when I went to law school also, I took a sandwich in a paper bag for lunch. You know, I wasn't going to spend $10 or something like that ordering my lunch from someplace. In fact, in law school, I can remember that if I had enough money to buy a Coke, I was doing really good. I thought that was good. But it was better than a glass of water, you know. But that's something to be careful of. I see people at jobs, and every single day they're ordering their lunch out. And you start adding that up, and what do you come up with? You know, so you just have to watch your expenses for food. Food, you know, if you're going to get prepared meals and things like that, it's going to cost a lot more than if you buy the ingredients, cook it yourself, and so forth.
Right. There's certainly an entertainment element to going out to dinner.
Mhm.
And after a hard day of work, sometimes it's nice to just have food. But what Jeff's pointing out, especially breakfast and lunch, yeah, you can really, really save money. Just think about the lunch. Now we're having so many delivery services. And when you start, and I don't mean to sound super careful with money, but if you're ordering a lunch to be delivered to you, and then the tax, and then the tip, and maybe a delivery charge, what are you really paying for?
Mhm.
And there's nothing wrong with good PB&J, right? On
That's
whole
right.
wheat. Whole wheat, right?
I used to eat tuna fish.
Tuna fish is very good. A can of tuna fish, white albacore and water,
Yeah.
probably about $1, right?
Yeah, doesn't cost
And
much.
Doesn't cost much at all.
The next item on our list is clothing. You want to talk about that a little bit?
We can
Eric?
get started with that. And clothing is one of those items that can be impulsive, and it can also be you're keeping up with your perception of what your friends can afford and what your friends can do. And it brings us to the broader category of social media. And whenever you're looking at social media, everybody always has a more exciting life than you do. And they always wear newer clothes and nicer clothes. And that's the nature of social media. And of course, part of mental health is to be satisfied with your lot in life, to try to do better, but to be satisfied. And when you try to compare yourself to others about purchasing clothing, it's a remedy for disaster. It's a menu.
Recipe.
Recipe. It's a remedy. It's not a remedy for anything. It's a recipe for disaster. Thank you. Jeff, when we ran through this before, I was fascinated by what you were saying about when you were first married with your two daughters.
Yes, yeah. We're talking about the cost of clothing, and one tip is I wouldn't hesitate to look at a secondhand store. You go to a Haddonfield, for example, they have a secondhand store. A lot of those clothes have never been worn, and that's where I used to go to buy clothes for my two daughters when I was in law school, and they were fine. They look good. They didn't have patches in the knees and stuff like that.
Although that's fashionable now, I think.
I guess.
Right. There are many people who are in a different position of life that buy clothes every season. And some of them don't get to the clothing and they give them to the secondhand store.
Right.
And it's a wonderful way to save money. And like a lot of these budget items, nothing like this is taught in school. And unless your parents or other friends of yours teach you things like this, and we hope that what Jeff and I are doing here seems like common sense in a lot of ways, but we see so many people who run into financial problems who really just could take a deep breath and think about things like this.
Right. As you can see, speaking of clothing, I'm wearing one of my Army West Point outfits today. Since the football team's 5-1, not actually, the Eagles are almost the inverse since they have a game tonight.
Yes, they do. If anyone's watching this live, our entire audience in New Jersey is either rooting for the Giants or the Eagles. So Jeff and I decided not to wear a jersey today. Maybe next week we'll wear the jersey of the team that wins.
Right.
But and for those of you not watching live, you already know the results of the game. Jeff, what about look, everybody, I talked about eating can be recreational, and we have to have an expense for that.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, look, we wrote down smoking and drinking. It's recreational. It's so expensive now, the way they've taxed those
extremely
things.
Expensive. And you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to look at how much you're spending if you're smoking or drinking, especially smoking. It just seems like it's ridiculously expensive. Many years ago, I was in California, and a case of Coors with tax cost $5.25. So that wasn't too bad.
No.
But now it's a little bit different.
Yeah, you can, of course, it's the same thing, but you can buy a 6-pack of beer now. It's probably $10 or so, let's say, including the sales tax they put on now. But you go to a bar now, and it's $7 a glass of beer.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that. A little pre-gaming and then Uber might save you money than buying all your beer out.
Yeah. Do we want to talk about hobbies and activities at all?
Or the savings.
We should go on.
Sure.
It is important to, like I said at the beginning, to have a budget, to prioritize the things that you have to spend money on each month, and to put a dollar figure on there. How much should it cost you? And try not to exceed that. And if you can do that, and if you can save a little bit of money, even if it's just a little bit every month, to have a fund in case COVID-19 comes along or something awful like that, you know, you're starting to be in decent shape. A lot of people may have a real nice wedding for one of their children, or might go on a real nice vacation with some of their family. And that's all well and good, but don't do it at the expense of the things that we've already talked about. You don't want to be having an expensive wedding and then not paying your mortgage. That's crazy. And that's kind of what we're saying right now. You have to set your priorities about these things.
Remember, if something like this has happened to you, that you've made a mistake, life is like a car. It's got a big windshield to see the future and just a little rear view mirror. So don't worry about what's happened. Just worry about fixing it going forward. And if you need a real fix, you have a lot of credit card debt, or if your budget just can't be fixed, no matter how well you're prioritizing things, give us a call. And it's very much a no judgment zone. Whether a bankruptcy can help you, we're just going to give you advice on the phone. And if it needs to, and if we can help, you'll be speaking to one of our attorneys who will take the time, Jeff or me or Stephanie or Rondi, and we'll help you. It's people make mistakes all sorts of ways. And just what we do for a living is help people who really didn't understand budgeting, or something bad like COVID-19's happened. There's no getting around it.
Right. One of the last things we wanted to talk about is, and this is just common sense, steer clear of these high interest loans that you can get, like payday loans, or you don't want to go down to Delaware and get a title loan on your car or anything like that. Just steer clear of those things, because the interest rates are absolutely ridiculous. And if you get in the habit of doing that, you get behind the curve. You're going to be in bad shape.
Right. People, it used to be the guy in the corner with the crooked nose wouldn't charge this much interest.
I don't think you would.
No, it's really, our clients borrow $1,000. They put the car up, and then every week they're paying 18% interest a week. So they're paying $18 a week. No, $180 a week on $1,000, and never getting to the principal, never getting the title back to their car. Jeff, that's a great point. Glad you brought that up.
Yeah. I think that's about it for today. I don't know if there's anything else.
It's 23 minutes.
Right. Yeah. So why don't we sign off and say, if you were watching, thank you for watching. You feel free to ask us questions while you're watching, or just send them to our Facebook site, and we can answer them at our next show. And we do this every Thursday afternoon, 2 p.m., and we will next week with our brand new system here. And so hopefully everything will work out okay, and you'll hear us and see us and stuff like that. So hope we see you next week. And until then, stay safe and God bless.